Daniel Carter crouched behind a crumbling wall, his breath shallow and uneven. The air smelled of smoke and decay, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Around him, the ruins of Chicago stretched endlessly, a graveyard of steel and concrete. Once a bustling city, it was now silent except for the distant hum of alien ships patrolling the skies. The Veil had come without warning, their massive fleet blotting out the sun as they descended upon Earth. They called themselves conquerors, but to Daniel, they were destroyers. He glanced over at Rachel Monroe, who was scanning the area with a pair of cracked binoculars. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her face was streaked with dirt. She looked tired. Everyone did. But there was still a spark in her eyes, a determination that refused to fade. Rachel was a biologist by training, not a fighter, yet she had proven herself invaluable to the small group of survivors Daniel led. Her knowledge of plants and ecosystems kept them fed, while her calm demeanor kept morale from collapsing entirely. "Clear," Rachel whispered, lowering the binoculars. Daniel nodded and motioned for the others to move forward. There were 6 of them in total, all that remained of what had once been a thriving resistance cell. Marcus Hale, a grizzled man with a permanent scowl, carried a rifle slung over his shoulder. Emily Dawson, young and wiry, clutched a backpack filled with tools and spare parts. Then there were 2 brothers, Alex and Sam Rivera, barely out of their teens, whose wide eyes betrayed their fear despite their best efforts to appear brave. The group moved cautiously through the wreckage, stepping over broken glass and twisted metal. Their destination was an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, rumored to hold supplies left behind during the evacuation. Supplies were scarce these days, and every trip outside their underground hideout was a gamble. But staying hidden wasn't an option either, not if they wanted to survive. As they neared the warehouse, a low rumble echoed in the distance. Everyone froze, their hearts pounding. It was the sound of a Veil patrol ship, its sleek, insect-like design glinting in the pale light. The ship hovered above the horizon, its sensors sweeping the ground below. For a moment, it seemed like it might pass them by. Then, without warning, a beam of red light shot down, striking a nearby building and reducing it to ash. "Move," Daniel hissed, pushing the group toward the nearest cover. They dove behind a pile of debris just as another beam tore through the air, where they had been standing moments before. The Veil weren't aiming randomly. They knew humans were here. Rachel clenched her fists, her mind racing. "They're using heat signatures," she said quietly. "We need to stay cool." Daniel nodded. "Stick close to the shadows. Don't make any sudden moves." The group crept along the edge of the ruins, keeping low and avoiding open spaces. The patrol ship circled overhead, its engines growling like some predatory beast. Every step felt like a leap into the unknown, every breath a risk. Yet somehow, they made it to the warehouse unscathed. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the floor was littered with broken crates and discarded equipment. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going for another week or 2. As the others began gathering what they could carry, Rachel noticed something unusual tucked beneath a pile of rubble, a metallic sphere, about the size of a basketball, pulsing faintly with light. "What is that?" Alex asked, peering over her shoulder. "I don't know," Rachel admitted, picking it up carefully. The surface was smooth and cold, etched with strange symbols that seemed to shift when she turned it in her hands. For the first time in months, a flicker of hope stirred within her. Maybe this was more than just junk. Maybe it was a sign that humanity still had a chance. Back at the underground hideout, Rachel placed the metallic sphere on a makeshift table in the center of the room. The dim light from a flickering lantern cast shadows on the walls, making the strange symbols on the sphere seem to dance. Everyone gathered around, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Daniel stood with his arms crossed, watching silently as Rachel examined the object. "What do you think it is?" Emily asked, tilting her head to get a better look. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she were afraid of disturbing whatever secrets the sphere held. "I'm not sure," Rachel replied, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "But it's definitely not human-made. The material feels different. And these symbols, they're not like anything I've ever seen." Marcus snorted, leaning against the wall with his usual scowl. "Great. Another alien thing. Just what we need." "Maybe it's important," Alex chimed in, his younger brother Sam nodding beside him. "It could be a weapon or something that helps us fight back." Daniel frowned but said nothing. He trusted Rachel's judgment, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this object was more trouble than it was worth. Still, they had no choice but to investigate further. If there was even a small chance it could help them, they had to take it. That night, as the others slept, Rachel stayed awake, staring at the sphere. Something about it drew her in, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. She reached out tentatively, her fingertips brushing against its surface. To her surprise, the sphere responded. A low hum filled the air, and the symbols began to glow brighter, pulsing in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Rachel gasped, pulling her hand back instinctively. But the sphere didn't stop. Instead, it projected a series of holographic images into the air above it. Star maps, strange creatures, and unfamiliar landscapes floated before her eyes. It was overwhelming, yet mesmerizing. She leaned closer, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Then, a voice, not spoken aloud but felt inside her mind, spoke. "You are not alone." Startled, Rachel stumbled backward, nearly knocking over the lantern. The voice was calm and steady, neither male nor female, but somehow comforting. She glanced around the room, half expecting someone else to have heard it, but the others were still asleep, oblivious to what was happening. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I am Kale," the voice replied. "A consciousness trapped between dimensions. I have waited long for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Rachel echoed, confusion mixing with awe. "What do you mean?" "You carry within you the essence of life, the will to survive, to adapt, to overcome. My creators abandoned me, leaving me adrift in the void. But you can understand." Rachel wasn't sure whether to believe what she was hearing. Was this some kind of trick, a trap set by the veil? Yet, deep down, she felt a connection to Kale, a sense that it was telling the truth. Slowly, she reached out again, placing her hand on the sphere. This time, she didn't pull away. The images change, showing fragments of Kale's past. It had once been part of a vast network of beings, working together to explore the universe. But conflict had torn them apart, leaving Kale stranded and forgotten. Now, it sought redemption, to prove that its existence still had meaning. "You've been waiting for someone like me?" Rachel asked, her voice steadier now. "Why?" "Because you are capable of reaching beyond fear and hatred," Kale explained. "Your world has suffered greatly, but it is not lost. Together, we can find a way to restore balance." Rachel sat back, her mind racing. Could this really be possible? Could an ancient alien entity hold the key to defeating the Veil? She knew she couldn't keep this to herself. In the morning, she would tell Daniel and the others. For now, though, she simply watched as the sphere continued to project its mysterious images, each one offering a glimpse into a universe far larger and stranger than she had ever imagined. As dawn approached, Rachel realized that their fight was no longer just about survival. It was about hope. And maybe, just maybe, Kale was the spark they needed to reignite it. The next morning, Rachel gathered the group in the main chamber of their hideout. The metallic sphere sat in the center of the room, its faint glow casting an otherworldly light on everyone's faces. Daniel stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable, while Marcus leaned against the wall, his usual scowl deeper than ever. Emily and the Rivera brothers sat on the floor, their eyes wide with curiosity. Rachel took a deep breath before speaking. "This isn't just some alien artifact," she began, her voice steady but tinged with excitement. "It's alive. It calls itself Kale, and it says it's been waiting for someone like us." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're saying this thing talks?" "Not exactly," Rachel replied. "It communicates through thoughts, feelings. Last night, it showed me images, star maps, creatures, places I can't even describe. It told me it was abandoned by its creators and left trapped between dimensions." Daniel frowned. "And you believe it? How do we know this isn't some kind of trick by the Veil?" "I thought the same thing at first," Rachel admitted. "But Kale doesn't feel hostile. It feels lost, like it wants to help." Emily leaned forward, her eyes shining with interest. "What does it want from us?" Rachel hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It says it believes in humanity, that we have something special, the ability to adapt, to survive, to overcome. It thinks we can work together to fight back against the Veil." The room fell silent as the others processed this. Alex broke the quiet first. "So, what? This thing is offering us a way to beat them." "It's not that simple," Rachel said. "Kale has knowledge about the Veil, their technology, their weaknesses. But using it won't be easy. We'll need to figure out how to communicate better, how to work with it." Daniel stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Even if we trust this Kale, how do we know it can actually deliver? What's its plan?" Rachel turned back to the sphere, placing her hand gently on its surface. Almost immediately, the symbols began to glow brighter, and a new set of holographic images appeared. This time, they showed detailed schematics of Veil ships and weapons, along with what looked like a massive orbital station. "This is one of their command centers," Rachel explained, pointing to the image of the station. "Kale says it houses something called the nullifier, a weapon they use to suppress human resistance. If we can get to it, maybe we can turn it against them." Marcus scoffed. "Get to it? You mean waltz into their fortress and take it over? Sounds like a suicide mission." "It's risky," Daniel agreed, his tone firm. "But if it works, it could give us the edge we need." "We don't have much of a choice," Rachel added softly. "If we stay hidden, we'll eventually run out of food, supplies, hope. This might be our only chance." The group exchanged uneasy glances. No one liked the idea of walking straight into enemy territory, but none of them could deny the desperation in Rachel's voice, or the spark of possibility in Cal's glowing symbols. Finally, Daniel nodded. "All right, we'll do it. But we'll need a plan, and we'll need to move fast." Over the next few hours, the group worked together to prepare. Emily studied the schematics projected by Kale, trying to understand the layout of the station. Marcus cleaned and checked their limited weapons, muttering under his breath about trusting alien machines. Meanwhile, Alex and Sam gathered whatever tools and supplies they could find, determined to contribute in any way they could. As the preparations continued, Rachel stayed close to the sphere, listening intently to Cal's guidance. She could feel its presence in her mind, calm and steady, like a beacon cutting through the chaos. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond hiding, beyond fear. When night fell, the group gathered once more. Their faces were grim but resolute. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew they couldn't give up. With Cal's help, they had a chance, not just to survive, but to fight back. As they prepared to leave, Rachel glanced at the sphere one last time. Its light pulsed softly, almost reassuringly. Whether it was truly an ally or something else entirely, she didn't know. But for now, it was enough. The group moved under the cover of darkness, their footsteps muffled by the ruins of what was once a bustling city. The air was cold and damp, carrying the faint scent of ash and rusted metal. Each member carried a weapon or tool, their faces tense with determination. At the center of the group was Rachel, clutching the metallic sphere tightly in her hands. Its faint glow illuminated her face, a reminder of the strange alliance they had formed with Kale. Daniel led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. Behind him, Marcus kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, his rifle ready to fire at a moment's notice. Emily followed closely, her backpack filled with gadgets and wires she hoped would come in handy. Alex and Sam brought up the rear, their youthful energy tempered by the weight of the mission ahead. Kale guided them through Rachel's mind, projecting images of the orbital station and its defenses. The alien entity's voice was calm but urgent, urging them to stay hidden and move quickly. "The Veil are not expecting an attack," it told Rachel. "But their sensors are sensitive. Avoid open spaces." As they approached the outskirts of the city, the massive silhouette of the orbital station loomed above them. It was a towering structure, its surface covered in blinking lights and strange machinery. A network of cables connected it to smaller outposts on the ground, forming a web of surveillance and control. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "This is it," Daniel whispered, crouching behind a pile of rubble. "From here, we'll need to find a way inside one of those ground stations. Kale says there's a maintenance tunnel that leads directly to the nullifier." Rachel nodded, her grip tightening on the sphere. "Kale will guide us. Just follow my lead." The group pressed on, sticking to the shadows as they navigated the maze of debris and abandoned vehicles. Every sound, the crunch of gravel, the distant hum of alien ships, made their hearts race. They knew one wrong move could mean discovery, and discovery meant death. As they neared the first outpost, Marcus held up a hand, signaling for the others to stop. He pointed to a pair of Veil drones patrolling the area, their insect-like bodies glinting in the dim light. The machines moved with mechanical precision, their sensors sweeping back and forth. "We'll have to time this carefully," Daniel murmured. "Emily, can you disable those things?" Emily nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she pulled a small device from her bag. She crept forward, staying low and using the wreckage for cover. When she was close enough, she activated the device, emitting a burst of electromagnetic interference. The drones froze mid-air, their systems overloaded, before crashing to the ground with a soft thud. "Good work," Daniel said, motioning for the group to move forward. They slipped past the disabled drones and entered the outpost, finding themselves in a narrow corridor lined with glowing panels and strange symbols. "This way," Rachel whispered, following Kale's directions. The sphere pulsed gently in her hands, lighting their path as they made their way deeper into the station. The further they went, the more tense the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the hum of machinery grew louder. At one point, they encountered a group of Veil soldiers, their tall, armored forms moving with eerie grace. The humans flattened themselves against the wall, holding their breath as the aliens passed by without noticing them. Finally, they'd reached the entrance to the maintenance tunnel. It was a small hatch embedded in the floor, secured with a complex locking mechanism. Emily knelt beside it, her fingers flying over the controls as she worked to bypass the security system. "You're doing great," Daniel encouraged her, keeping watch at the end of the corridor. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. After several tense minutes, the hatch clicked open. The group exchanged relieved glances before descending into the tunnel. It was dark and cramped, the air thick with the smell of oil and metal. Kale's light provided their only illumination as they moved deeper underground. "The nullifier is close," Rachel said softly, feeling Kale's presence grow stronger in her mind. "But so are the Veil. We'll need to be careful." No one responded. They didn't need to. The weight of what lay ahead hung heavy in the air, a shared understanding that this was their last chance. Failure wasn't an option, not if they wanted to reclaim their world. As they continued through the tunnel, Rachel felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in months, they weren't just running or hiding. They were fighting back. And with Kale's help, they might just stand a chance. The maintenance tunnel felt endless, its narrow walls pressing in on the group as they moved deeper into the heart of the orbital station. The air grew warmer and heavier, carrying the faint hum of machinery that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Rachel clutched the metallic sphere tightly, its steady glow casting long shadows on the grimy walls. Kale's presence was stronger now, almost overwhelming, filling her mind with a mix of urgency and reassurance. "This is it," Rachel whispered, stopping suddenly. Ahead of them, the tunnel opened into a large chamber filled with complex machinery and glowing panels. In the center of the room stood the nullifier, a massive device shaped like a towering obelisk, pulsing with an eerie blue light. The sight of it sent a shiver down her spine. It looked alien and unnatural, yet undeniably powerful. Daniel stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. "We're here," he said quietly. "Now what?" Kale's voice echoed in Rachel's mind. "You must interface with the nullifier. I will guide you through the process." Rachel nodded, turning to the others. "I need to connect with it. Kale says it can help me reprogram it to target the Veil's neural network." Marcus frowned, crossing his arms. "And how exactly are you going to do that? You're not exactly an engineer." "I'll manage," Rachel replied firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. She glanced at Emily. "Can you keep an eye on the entrance? If any Veil show up, we'll need to buy time." Emily nodded, already setting up a small device to monitor the corridor leading into the chamber. Alex and Sam positioned themselves near the door, makeshift weapons in hand, while Marcus stayed close to Rachel, his rifle ready. Taking a deep breath, Rachel approached the nullifier. Its surface was smooth and cold, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift when she looked at them too long. Kale's guidance flowed into her mind, calm but insistent. "Place your hands on the surface. Let me guide your thoughts." Rachel hesitated for a moment before placing her palms against the machine. A jolt of energy surged through her, making her gasp. Images flooded her mind. Strange landscapes, alien faces, and fragments of the Veil's history. She saw glimpses of their rise, their wars, and their fear of extinction. It was overwhelming, but Kale's voice remained steady, anchoring her. "Focus," Kale urged. "Find the core system. Redirect the energy flow." Rachel pushed aside the chaos in her mind, concentrating on the task. The symbols on the nullifier began to shift, responding to her touch. Lines of light spread across its surface, forming new patterns as she worked. Sweat dripped down her forehead, and her muscles ached from the strain, but she didn't stop. Meanwhile, tension mounted among the others. Emily's device beeped softly, signaling movement in the corridor. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "How many?" Daniel asked, gripping his weapon tightly. "Too many," Emily replied. "We don't have much time." Daniel turned to Marcus. "Hold them off as long as you can. We'll get Rachel out of here once she's done." Marcus grunted in acknowledgement, moving to stand beside Alex and Sam. The three of them braced themselves, knowing the odds were against them. Back at the nullifier, Rachel felt her strength fading. Her vision blurred, and her legs threatened to give out. But Kale's voice kept her going. "Almost there. Just a little more." With a final surge of effort, Rachel completed the reprogramming. The nullifier emitted a low hum, its blue light flickering before stabilizing. She stumbled back, her body trembling with exhaustion. "It's done," she gasped. "Activate it." Daniel nodded, pressing a sequence of buttons on a nearby control panel. The nullifier roared to life, sending waves of energy rippling outward. The effect was immediate. The Veil soldiers outside froze mid-step, their bodies convulsing as their neural network collapsed. "We did it," Rachel breathed, sinking to the ground. Her relief was short-lived, however, as the sound of alarms blared through the station. The group exchanged grim looks. They weren't safe yet. "Let's move," Daniel shouted, helping Rachel to her feet. They had struck a blow against the Veil, but escaping alive would be their next challenge. The alarms blared louder with each passing second, their shrill sound echoing through the chamber like a countdown to disaster. The group moved quickly, adrenaline pushing them forward despite their exhaustion. Rachel leaned heavily on Daniel as they made their way back toward the maintenance tunnel. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled from the strain of interfacing with the nullifier, but she forced herself to keep moving. "We don't have much time," Daniel said, his voice low but urgent. "They'll send reinforcements any minute." Marcus led the way, his rifle raised as he scanned the corridor ahead. Alex and Sam followed closely behind him, their makeshift weapons ready despite the fear in their eyes. Emily stayed near the rear, clutching her backpack and glancing nervously over her shoulder. The hum of machinery around them grew louder, a sign that the station was still reacting to the nullifier's activation. As they reached the entrance to the tunnel, Marcus held up a hand, signaling for the others to stop. He peered around the corner, his jaw tightening at what he saw. A squad of Veil soldiers was approaching, their armored forms moving with unnatural speed. Behind them, drones hovered silently, their sensors scanning for intruders. "There's too many," Marcus muttered, stepping back to join the group. "We can't fight them head-on." Daniel frowned, his mind racing. Is there another way out? Rachel shook her head weakly. "Kale says this is the only route back to the surface. If we try to go anywhere else, we'll get lost, or worse. Then we'll have to hold them off long enough to get Rachel and the others into the tunnel," Marcus said firmly. "I'll stay behind and buy you some time." "No way," Daniel snapped. "We're not leaving anyone behind." "It's the only option," Marcus replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You've got kids to protect, and Rachel's barely standing. I'm not letting all of us die here." Before anyone could protest, Marcus turned and ran down the corridor, firing his rifle to draw the Veil's attention. His shots echoed loudly, causing the aliens to pause and redirect their focus. The group watched in stunned silence as Marcus disappeared into the chaos, his figure growing smaller with each step. "Come on," Daniel urged, snapping everyone out of their shock. He helped Rachel into the tunnel, followed by Alex and Sam. Emily brought up the rear, her hands shaking as she sealed the hatch behind them. The tunnel was dark and cramped, its narrow walls making every step feel suffocating. Rachel leaned against the cold metal, her breathing shallow. She wanted to argue, to insist they go back for Marcus, but she knew it was too late. The sound of gunfire faded behind them, replaced by the distant hum of alien machinery. "He knew what he was doing," Daniel said quietly, though his voice betrayed his pain. "He gave us a chance. We can't waste it." No one spoke as they pressed forward, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The weight of Marcus's sacrifice hung heavy in the air, a reminder of how much they had already lost, and how much they still stood to lose. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged into the ruins of the city. The sky above was tinged with orange from the fires burning in the distance, casting an eerie glow over the wreckage. Rachel looked back toward the orbital station, her heart heavy with guilt and grief. "We did what we came to do," Daniel said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But this isn't over. The Veil are weakened, but they're not gone yet." Rachel nodded slowly, clutching the metallic sphere tightly. Kale's presence was faint now, almost as if it were fading away. She didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was certain. They had taken a stand, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, humanity could rise again. The group stumbled through the ruins of the city, their bodies weary and their spirits heavy. The metallic sphere in Rachel's hands pulsed faintly, its light dimmer than before, as if it too was running out of energy. Every step felt like a struggle, but they couldn't stop, not yet. The sound of distant explosions from the orbital station reminded them that the Veil were still fighting back, even if their forces were weakened. Daniel led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. His mind kept drifting back to Marcus, his sacrifice etched into Daniel's thoughts like a scar. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. They had made it this far because of Marcus, and now they had to survive. For him, for Earth, for everyone who had already been lost. Rachel walked beside Daniel, her steps unsteady. She could feel Kale's presence growing fainter with each passing moment. It was as though the entity was slipping away, its strength fading after helping them reprogram the nullifier. "Kale," she whispered softly, hoping for a response. But there was only silence, broken occasionally by the distant hum of alien ships overhead. "Are you okay?" Emily asked, noticing Rachel's pale face and trembling hands. "I don't know," Rachel admitted. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. I think Kale is leaving." Emily frowned, glancing at the sphere. "What do you mean?" "It's like it gave everything it had to help us," Rachel explained. "It's fading." Alex and Sam exchanged worried looks but said nothing. They were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they could sense the weight of it, the loss, the uncertainty. Even in the midst of victory, there was no joy, only exhaustion and grief. As they reached the edge of the ruins, the group paused to catch their breath. The horizon was painted with streaks of orange and red, the fires from the city casting long shadows across the ground. In the distance, they could see the outline of their underground hideout, a small, crumbling building half buried in the earth. It wasn't much, but it was home. "We're almost there," Daniel said, trying to sound encouraging. But his words felt hollow, even to him. Suddenly, the sphere in Rachel's hands began to glow brighter, startling everyone. The symbols on its surface shifted rapidly, and a soft hum filled the air. For a moment, Kale's voice returned, faint but clear. "You must continue. This is not the end." Rachel stared at the sphere, tears welling up in her eyes. "Kale, thank you." The entity didn't respond, but the light faded completely, leaving the sphere cold and lifeless in her hands. Rachel clutched it tightly, feeling a mix of sadness and gratitude. She knew Kale had done all it could, and now it was up to them to carry the torch. They continued toward the hideout in silence, the weight of everything they had been through pressing down on them. When they finally reached the entrance, Daniel pushed open the heavy metal door, revealing the dimly lit interior. The others filed in quietly, collapsing onto chairs or leaning against the walls. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The toll of the mission was written on their faces. Rachel sat down in a corner, holding the sphere close to her chest. She thought about Marcus, about Kale, about all the sacrifices that had brought them here. Despite the pain, she felt something else stirring within her, hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. They had struck a blow against the veil, proving that humanity wasn't finished yet. Daniel approached her, crouching down to meet her gaze. "We'll rebuild," he said firmly. "One step at a time." Rachel nodded, managing a weak smile. "Yeah, one step at a time." Outside, the fires continued to burn, lighting up the night sky. But amidst the destruction, there was a flicker of possibility, a chance to rise again. And for the first time in months, the group allowed themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future wasn't lost. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and quiet reflection. The group stayed hidden in their underground hideout, tending to their wounds and trying to process everything that had happened. Rachel spent most of her time sitting alone in a corner, the lifeless metallic sphere resting in her lap. She turned it over in her hands, tracing the faint outlines of the symbols etched into its surface. Though Kale was gone, she couldn't shake the feeling that its presence lingered somehow, like a whisper carried on the wind. Daniel worked tirelessly to keep everyone focused. He organized food rations, repaired broken equipment, and checked the perimeter for any signs of Veil activity. But even he struggled to mask the weight of Marcus's absence. Every time he passed the spot where Marcus used to sit, his jaw tightened, and his eyes grew distant. Still, he forced himself to stay strong. For the others, for Rachel, for hope. Emily tried to distract herself by tinkering with gadgets and tools, but her hands often froze mid-task as memories of Marcus flooded her mind. Alex and Sam stuck close together, their usual energy subdued. They talked less, played fewer games, and spent more time helping Daniel with chores around the hideout. It was as if they were all holding their breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. One evening, as the group gathered around a small fire in the center of the room, Rachel finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what Kale showed me," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the crackling flames. "When I interfaced with the nullifier, I saw things. Pieces of the Veil's history." Everyone turned to look at her, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowed. "What kind of things?" Rachel hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "They're not so different from us. At least, they weren't always like this. They started out scared, just trying to survive. Their world was dying, and they thought invading Earth would save them." Alex frowned. "But they destroyed us. How is that survival?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "Maybe desperation made them cruel. Maybe they convinced themselves we didn't deserve to live because we were weaker. But deep down, I think they're still afraid. Afraid of losing what little they have left." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change what they've done. We can't trust them." "No," Rachel agreed. "But maybe there's another way. If we could show them that we're not just animals to be crushed, if we could make them see our humanity." Her voice trailed off, leaving the room heavy with thought. Emily spoke up hesitantly. "You mean, talk to them, after everything?" "Not now," Rachel said quickly. "We're not ready for that yet. But someday, maybe." For a moment, no one responded. The idea seemed impossible, almost naive. Yet there was something undeniably powerful about it, a glimmer of possibility in a world consumed by darkness. As the fire burned lower, the group fell silent again, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the ruins of the city loomed silently under the stars, a reminder of how much had been lost. But inside the hideout, something new was stirring, a fragile seed of hope planted in the ashes of despair. Later that night, Rachel sat alone, staring at the sphere. She didn't know if Kale could still hear her, but she whispered anyway. "Thank you," she murmured, "for showing us that we're stronger than we thought, for reminding us who we are." Though no answer came, Rachel felt a strange sense of peace. Humanity wasn't perfect. They were flawed, broken, scared, but they were survivors. And as long as they held on to that spark of resilience, they would endure. In the distance, the first rays of dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. It was a small sign, but it was enough. A new day was beginning, and with it came the promise of a future worth fighting for. Weeks passed, and life in the underground hideout settled into a fragile routine. The group worked together to rebuild what little they could, scavenging supplies from the ruins above, and fortifying their shelter against potential threats. The Veil's presence in the skies had diminished since the nullifier's activation, but no one dared to believe the danger was truly over. Every creak of metal or distant hum sent them scrambling for cover, their nerves stretched thin. Rachel spent much of her time studying the sphere, even though Kale's voice had fallen silent. She traced its cold surface with her fingers, searching for answers that weren't there. Part of her wondered if she imagined the entire experience, if Kale had ever existed at all. But deep down, she knew it had been real. The changes within herself were proof enough. She felt stronger now, more determined, as if Kale's final gift had been the courage to keep going. One evening, as the group gathered around the fire, Daniel stood up suddenly, his expression tense. "We can't stay here forever," he said, breaking the quiet. His words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and unavoidable. Emily looked up from the gadget she'd been repairing. "What do you mean?" "This place is safe, for now," Daniel explained, pacing slowly. "But it's not enough. We need to take back our world. Not just survive, but fight. If we don't start pushing back, the Veil will regroup and we'll lose whatever advantage we have. Alex frowned, clutching his makeshift weapon tightly. How? There's only 6 of us. 7, Rachel corrected softly, holding up the sphere. Kale may be gone, but we still have this. And we have each other. Daniel nodded. Exactly. We're not alone anymore. There are others out there, other survivors. If we can find them, bring them together, we might stand a chance. The idea sparked something in the group. For weeks, they'd been focused on survival, shrinking their world to the confines of the hideout. But Daniel's words reminded them of the bigger picture, the possibility of reclaiming Earth, of rebuilding what had been lost. The next morning, the group packed what little they could carry and prepared to leave the safety of the hideout. It wasn't an easy decision, but they knew staying hidden wouldn't win the war. As they stepped outside, the sunlight felt foreign on their faces, almost too bright after so many days underground. The city around them was eerily quiet, its broken buildings standing like tombstones. Rachel walked beside Daniel, the sphere tucked securely in her bag. Where do we start? She asked. We look for signs of life, Daniel replied. Smoke, footprints, anything. People won't stay hidden forever. They'll come out when they think it's safe. The search was slow and exhausting, but after 3 days, they found their first clue. A faint trail of smoke rising from the remains of an old factory. Cautiously, they approached, weapons ready. To their relief, they discovered a small group of survivors huddled inside, wary but alive. These are good people, Rachel said later, watching as the newcomers shared stories of their struggles. They'd been fighting too, in their own way. By the end of the week, the group had grown to 15. Each new face brought fresh hope, new skills, and renewed determination. Together, they began to plan, not just for survival, but for resistance. They mapped out strategies, pooled resources, and trained for battle. As Rachel sat by the fire one night, watching the growing group interact, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known in years. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it was resilient, and with every step forward, they were proving that the Veil hadn't won. Not yet. Above them, the stars shone brightly, indifferent to the chaos below. But for the first time in months, Rachel allowed herself to dream of a future where humanity could rise again, not as victims, but as victors. Months passed, and the small group of survivors grew into something more, a movement. Word spread quickly among the ruins of cities and the shadows of forests. People emerged from hiding, drawn by stories of a resistance that refused to give up. They came with little, scraps of food, broken tools, battered weapons, but they brought something far more valuable: hope. Rachel stood at the edge of what had once been a park, now overgrown with weeds and littered with debris. The sphere rested in her hands, its surface dull but familiar. It had become a symbol for the resistance, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. Around her, dozens of people worked together to build barricades, repair shelters, and train for battle. The sight filled her with a quiet pride. Daniel approached, his face etched with lines of exhaustion, but also determination. We're ready, he said simply. His voice carried a weight that made Rachel's heart skip a beat. For what? She asked, though she already knew the answer. To take back our world, Daniel replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. The Veil are weak, disorganized. If we strike now, we can drive them out for good. Rachel nodded, clutching the sphere tightly. She thought about Kale, about Marcus, about everyone who had sacrificed so much to get them here. This was their moment. Their chance to prove that humanity wasn't just a species clinging to survival. It was a spark, a flame that refused to be extinguished. The attack on the remaining Veil forces was swift and coordinated. Groups of fighters moved through the ruins, targeting key locations marked by Emily's maps and intelligence gathered from scouts. The nullifier's effects still lingered, leaving the aliens confused and vulnerable. For every Veil ship that tried to retaliate, there were 10 humans standing in its way, armed with courage and desperation. As the battle raged, Rachel found herself at the center of it all, leading a team to disable one of the last orbital stations. Her hands trembled as she worked alongside Emily to reprogram the station's controls, but her mind was clear. Kale's lessons echoed within her, guiding her movements like an invisible hand. When the station finally went dark, a cheer erupted from the fighters below. By dawn, the Veil were gone. Their ships flooded into the sky, leaving behind only silence. The humans stood amidst the wreckage, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. Some hugged each other tightly. Others knelt in prayer or stared at the horizon, unable to believe what they had achieved. Rachel walked to the top of a hill overlooking the city. Behind her, the survivors began to rebuild, clearing rubble and planting seeds in patches of earth. It would take years, maybe decades, to restore what had been lost. But for the first time in a long time, the future felt possible. Daniel joined her, his arm brushing hers as he stood beside her. "It's not over," he said quietly. "There's still so much work to do." "I know," Rachel replied, smiling faintly. "But we'll get there, one step at a time." In her hands, the sphere pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly. Rachel glanced down at it, her heart skipping a beat. Maybe Kale wasn't completely gone after all, or maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was the lesson it had left behind, that even in the darkest times, reaching out to each other, to hope, could change everything. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Rachel turned her gaze toward the horizon. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was theirs to walk. Together, they had faced the end of the world and chosen to begin again.